In November of 1950, the Korean War was witness to the first jet versus jet victory. The initial dogfight happened between an American Lockheed Shooting Star and a Soviet MiG-15 during an attack on the Sinuiju bridges south of the Yalu River. The Americans were outnumbered and their aircraft technologically inferior, but they quickly proved to have superior skills and plenty of determination to face their enemy. The encounter, led by pilot Russel J. would be claimed as the first jet versus jet victory, but it was later found that the Soviet aircraft returned to base safely. Still, it would take just one more day to match the incredible feat and take its rightful place in history. Jet propulsion. During the final years of World War II, the Allies and the Axis powers were focused on developing state-of-the-art weaponry. Two areas in particular would revolutionize global technology. The first was the atomic bomb, and the second was jet propulsion. Several experimental aircraft were designed, but few were actually produced. The ever-evolving technological advances rendered many models obsolete even before they became operational. Still, the Lockheed F-80 Shooting Star flew for the first time in January of 1944. The breakthrough aircraft broke the 500 miles per hour barrier and became the first operational jet fighter from the U.S. Affectionately called superfighters by the press, the aircraft became the main selling point to raise funds to replace all propeller aircraft. The Shooting Star subsequently participated in several air displays and air shows across the country, achieved the first transcontinental jet flight in 1946, and broke a world airspeed record in 1947. Jet power also brought air combat to higher levels of speed and lethality. The significant upgrades in performance compared to piston engines included higher top speed, twice the cruise speed, greater ceiling, and sustained climb rate. P-80A and P-80B were the first models, and they successfully served for 18 months in Germany. A definitive model was then built, the F-80C, which was heavier and more powerful and sophisticated. It would serve well in the Far East Air Force during the first months of the Korean War. As the conflict raged on, the U.S. Air Force's first fighter interceptor would quickly make a name for itself, especially after the first jet engine-powered aircraft battle in history. Facing the Soviets. In October of 1950, the U.S. Air Force learned that the Soviets had a more advanced fighter after receiving blurred images from an F-51 gun camera. The Soviets' 29th Fighter Aviation Regiment had secretly deployed 40 MiG-15s to China, which would join the 151st Aviation Division to create the 64th Fighter Aviation Corps. By November, they were ready for combat. The aircraft were first sighted south of the Yalu River, but the first engagement with the Soviets actually happened with American F-51 Mustangs. The Soviets would later claim to have downed a Shooting Star after intercepting 10 of them on November 1st. But the U.S. Air Force recorded 2 losses on that date from anti-aircraft artillery and ground attacks, not by MiG-15s. Still, the Soviet aircraft posed a significant threat to the United Nations air supremacy. The 4th Fighter Interceptor Group was consequently sent to Korea. The fleet was equipped with F-86A Sabres, the first swept-wing fighters considered versatile and adaptable enough to counter the MiG-15s in high-speed dogfights. Meanwhile, the F-80s and F-51s would continue to execute ground attacks. But the Sabres would not arrive until mid-December, and the Shooting Stars would need to face the powerful MiG-15s on their own. An imminent clash. On November 8, 1950, the imminent clash between Shooting Stars and MiG-15s took place. Author Warren Thompson tells in his book F-80 Shooting Star Units of the Korean War that several Yak-type fighters had been reported in the surroundings of the Sinuiju airfield. Hours later, 4 F-80s from the 16th Fighter Interceptor Squadron targeted the anti-aircraft artillery sites in the area. Lieutenant Colonel Evans G. Stevens was the senior pilot and commanding officer of the 16th. Hovering right on his wing was First Lieutenant Russel J. on his first mission in the area. Stevens recalled that, quote, "It was a beautiful day. The group had dropped several bombs on target and was now heading southeast on a climb to gain distance and altitude. The flight leader used 97% power, which would allow the remaining pilots to join the group after the strafing. While dodging anti-aircraft fire, the commander heard on the radio that several enemy aircraft had been sighted taking off from Antung and were heading towards them. Stevens turned left to get a better view and realized the Soviet aircraft might be several miles south of the Yalu. He had Brown about 100 yards off his 4 o'clock and 2 others around a quarter mile behind. The enemy strikes suddenly stopped, and 12 MiG-15s emerged about 2,500 feet below them. There were 4 to their left, 4 to their right, and another 4 behind them. Stevens' wingman described the scene, quote, As a matter of fact, they were doing loops and barrel rolls. I thought to myself that this has got to be a crazy war when the enemy can practice stunt flying right in front of you. Suddenly, all hell broke loose. While Stevens edged to the right and tried to get behind the enemy fleet, Brown broke left and saw 2 silver aircraft pass right by him. He then opened the throttle and tacked on to an enemy's tail. While he struggled to maneuver into a firing position and close on the enemy fighter, he inadvertently exceeded Mach 0.8 and his F-80 started buffeting badly. He later recounted that, quote, "These were definitely MiGs, and I got a clear look at the communist jet as we bottomed out, and it started a very fast climb back up into the sun. The aircraft had no distinguishing markings, just polished aluminum, swept wings, and pretty fast." The leading MiG then passed the lieutenant colonel, and he saw a red star on its side. When he was finally positioned to get an adequate pursuit curve on it, the lead was about 1,500 feet away. Stevens burst in the Soviet and noticed debris coming off its left wing. The MiG then headed for the safety of the river. Meanwhile, Stevens rolled to the left and caught a glimpse of an F-80 chasing a MiG in a steep dive. It was First Lieutenant Brown, flying at maximum speed after the Soviet. Brown would recount that, quote, "When the MiG ahead of me broke to the left, he made a fatal mistake. There was little doubt that he could climb faster than me, but when he turned, I cut him off and got in 4 good short bursts with my guns. It was difficult to tell if I had hit him, for he just rolled over and headed for the deck in a steep dive. I racked my F-80 around and followed him down. My airspeed was indicating over 600 miles per hour, but I couldn't close the gap. The Soviet was about 1,000 feet away when Brown shot another 4 bursts at him. Black smoke could be spotted, and the American pilot seized the opportunity. He then fired 1 long burst and hit the MiG, which immediately burst into flames and exploded. The confrontation lasted less than a minute, but the repercussions were enormous. The press had a field day and proclaimed it the first jet versus jet victory. However, it was discovered decades later that the Soviet pilot had actually returned to base safely. The landmark victory would then go on to another confrontation that happened just 1 day later. History. Lieutenant Commander William T. Ammen, the commanding officer of the VF-111 Sundowners, led the Flying Target Combat Air Patrol aboard a Grumman F-9F-2B Panther, the U.S. Navy's first successful carrier-based jet fighter and one of the most widely used in the Korean War. On November 9, 1950, the Panthers took off from the USS Philippine Sea Carrier to attack the Sinuiju bridges again. They would soon face a MiG squadron from the 39th Guards Fighter Air Regiment, led by Captain Mikhail Grachev. Ammen quickly identified Grachev's MiG closing behind him and turned his VF-111 section towards it. Grachev had climbed from 4,000 to 15,000 feet and yawed to find the Panthers, but he gave his opponents a window, and Ammen and his wingman George Holloman immediately opened fire. The MiG then dove vertically, and the Panthers had trouble following suit. Despite the buffeting after approaching the terminal velocity, Ammen fought rudder reversal and fired more rounds. Grachev and Ammen started to pull through at 3,000 feet, but Ammen was only able to recover at about 200 feet. During the maneuver, he lost sight of the MiG, but Holloman saw it hitting a hillside and erupting in flames. After the dogfight, the disorganized Soviets claimed to have shot down at least 5 American aircraft, but they were mistaken. No U.S. aircraft were lost in action that day, and Ammen has gone down in history as having achieved the first jet-on-jet victory. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our Dark Skies channel to witness more epic stories about legendary aircraft. And let us know in the comments below your thoughts on this incredible double feat by the Americans.